he all of a sudden realized that the bank door could only be locked from the outside. And this was a miss in the training. And as he was like loading everybody in and he realized this, he left himself out on the outside and he locked the door, put everybody in like the safe spot for the bank. And he went and found an air vent, a larger air vent he was able to get his body into. And he said about half his body was out. And the trainer came right over top, leveled the bank, actually ended up taking the safe and rolled the safe a few times, but everybody was fine inside. And he just remembers like hanging, like he somehow found some handholds inside this vent. And it felt like he said his legs were up. It felt like a vacuum was trying to suck him out. And of course, like the roar of this tornado, but he got everybody to safety. And he made that split second decision that, and he didn't know if he was going to find that air vent. Like everybody else came first, and he was sorted out after, and he had less than seconds to find that. And just that's badass.
These are stories of outdoor adventure and expert advice from folks with calloused hands. I'm James Nash, and this is the Six Ranch Podcast. In the United States, there are about 15.2 million hunters. That's how many hunting licenses we sell in the country. And they spend around $21 billion per year, which breaks down to an average of $2,800 per hunter. Now, we need to be really smart about how we spend that money. You can't spend it on stuff that's going to break. Otherwise, you have to buy something else again, and you end up costing yourself even more. We also need to be smart about how much weight we carry in our packs, because that's a serious limiting factor. One way to remove about 5 pounds out of your pack without sacrificing your ability to find animals is to get rid of your spotting scope and tripod. Now, there's a time and a place for those things, and I carry both of them a lot. But if I need to go lightweight, I'm going to carry stabilized binoculars. And the best stabilized binoculars I have ever used are from Sig Sauer. They are the Zulu 6, and they just came out with a new pair called the Zulu 6 HDX. I use the 12 power magnification model. They weigh 21.5 ounces, and they have 2 modes of stabilization. So you throw the lever forward once, and that's going to stabilize the image. If you turn it off and turn it back on again, that's going to stabilize it even more. And I'm not kidding. It is more stable than if you're glassing from a tripod. It is absolutely incredible. You're going to be able to see stuff at just incredible distances and really break it down. Like, you're going to be able to tell the difference between a Billy and a Nanny mountain goat at a mile. You're going to be able to actually see if there's a kicker coming off that 4x4 muley that just popped up over the hill. They work great at early and last light. They work great at highlight. They fit really well in my hands. Like, this was one of the first products that I asked Sig to make when I started working with them. And to no surprise, they were already on it. They were way ahead of me. But this is a really good piece of gear. I highly encourage you look into it. You can go to sigsauer.com, look for the Zulu 6 HDX. Comes in a few different magnification settings, but the one that I like the best is the 12 power. Check it out. Today's show is about passion and pursuit, but it's also about tornadoes. And it seems very fitting to start this with a quote from Tim Samaras. He was an early storm chaser. He changed the game for how tornadoes are understood and predicted. And this is what he had to say. Keep your focus on your passion in life, in the things you enjoy doing. You'll get there. Trust me, I'm doing it. It's also worth mentioning that Tim died in a tornado on May 31st, 2013, El Reno, Oklahoma. Dig in and hold on tight, because this show is going to make your palms sweaty at times, but hopefully it ignites something in you that you can carry on and maybe change your direction a little bit. Okay, I want to start out with the story you told the other day, which is that you got inside of the largest tornado ever. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. Tell me the story.
Yes, that'd be one of our wildest stories from chasing, is that we were caught inside a tornado, and that's not our goal. You know, when we're chasing these tornadoes, we want to get close, but we definitely want to get inside. And but this tornado, we read it a bit wrong, and there's unpredictable factors of what we're doing. And so we got too close to this tornado, and it just grew so quickly. You know, it went from being a quarter mile wide to eventually being 2.6 miles wide. So the world's largest tornado, like Ripley's Believe It or Not type thing. And this tornado was expanding so quickly. We're driving away. We always have an exit strategy, no matter what. When we're getting into the thick of it, we as a team, we're always like, okay, what's the exit strategy? What's that? And so we knew it was the south grid road that we had to go. And so, you know, I've been storm chasing for 11 years. My first half of my storm chasing career, I was the driver. That was my job. So I was driving for this.
And you have a history with, you know, for sort of advanced motor vehicle things. You've done all kinds of racing, driving in a high stress situation. Sounds like it's right up your alley.
For sure. I do feel very confident at it. I do laugh though, like, you know, I get pulled onto and sometimes we'll do like national interviews with like news organizations, and they'll be like, "We have Ricky Forbes here, professional driver," and like, nope, I just have my driver's license. Yeah, but you know, anyways, I do feel comfortable behind the wheel, and so back to the story, the tornado's creeping up on us, getting closer and closer, and the guys I'm with were starting to get pretty rattled, and because I have my eyes going forward, that's it. But and the tornado's coming from our right hand side, and they're telling me it's getting closer. I can feel the winds rocking the truck, but with storm chasing, that's not something you necessarily want to get rattled about, because those winds can mean many things. You could be beside the tornado, or you could be 10 miles away from the tornado. Right. So you don't want to overreact with the winds. But then our ears popped. And I actually didn't discover that until that day, but the pressure changes inside a tornado. And the reason why it changes, because, you know, these storms that produce tornadoes, they're called supercells. And supercells, you know, they can be 40, 50, 70,000 feet tall. And reference-wise, like a plane flies around 35, 40,000 feet. And so the way your ears might pop in an airplane, that's what's happening. It's bringing that pressure from that airplane height down to the ground.
Wow.
And so our ears popped. And that's when we knew we were inside the tornado. And at that point, I put us down into the ditch. And, you know, if you're ever in a vehicle in your high winds, it's a better idea to put yourself in the ditch if you can, just so, you know, if those winds get over underneath you and roll you or pick you up altogether. And so we're down in the ditch. We're going along. And at this point, you know, I often get the question, like, were you scared? Well, at first, a large portion of storm chasing is the excitement of it and the adrenaline side of it. But at that point, once our ears popped, it was complete terror. And all I could focus on is I just wanted to get out alive. And don't get me wrong, like, as a driver, I should be thinking for my team as well. And but for myself, I was 26 years old at the time, and I was like, this isn't how I go out. And so as I tell you about this, like, it's tough not to go back to that moment. Like, it gives me chills, and it was really scary. And there's homes lifting up, and it felt like a scene out of Twist, if you've ever seen that movie. Like,
and you were like actually seeing homes get picked up off the ground.
Yeah, 100%. You know, like, there's 2 farm homes beside us, and luckily, like, we already knew that those homes had been cleared out because we've been hanging around for a little bit, knowing the tornado might show up there.
Yeah,
and so we had stopped by and said, "Hey, just so you know, this might happen." And so they had left, but one home got torn to shreds. But the next home actually, like Wizard of Oz, Dorothy, like, got picked up as a whole and slowly rotated up above us. And there's farm machinery going up, tons and tons of hay bales. Like felt like hundreds of hay bales were just floating around the sky above us. And I'll never forget, this 2-ton grain old farm truck was in the ditch right beside us. We're going along, and as we pull up beside it, it starts to lift up, and I was like, "Oh, this is it."
Yeah,
like, we're going next. There's no way. We're in a 1/2-ton Ford. Sorry, it doesn't matter the truck, but we're in a 1/2-ton truck, and
I think it matters. It's worth saying.
We're in a Ford F-150, and we work with Ford, but we're in this 1/2-ton, and this 2-ton grain farm truck starts to go up, and it was just, I felt like this is it. And at this point, it was all happening together. Like, all together, we were inside the tornado. Like, the footage says we're inside the tornado for 45 seconds, but it feels like an hour. Like, when I tell you this, like, I remember every detail, and it felt so long And as this is getting lifted up, we're getting hit with steel sheeting from like must have been a barn or a roof that got ripped apart, and it had taken our truck cap off, and we saw that go, and it was starting to hit our truck and come into our truck. It had taken out our windows. We'd nearly blown all of our windows at this point. The guys are starting to say their goodbyes in the truck, and yeah, it was a really tough experience. And sorry, getting back to the point of stories that this farm truck is lifted up, and I got distracted and I looked over, and at the same time we hit an approach, and this ditch we're in was about 7-8 feet deep. Okay. And I had pedal to the metal. I have no idea how fast going, but I'm sure it was going, I'm thinking kilometers being Canadian, but like miles an hour. Like it had to be going like 80-ish miles an hour.
And I'm sure it's difficult to even know like which way is getting away from the storm. If it's increasing in size that much, there's so much chaos in the wind, it would be hard to know which way to go.
100%. And with storm chasing, is once you start getting tornadoes that have that kind of energy, they spawn, I forget the term, but like essentially outside tornadoes.
Okay.
Like a hurricane might. Like where you get like, because, and that did happen inside the storm because we found out afterwards, this tornado was circulating so strong that we got these peripheral tornadoes that were happening. And so you don't quite know what you're about to encounter. And so we hit this approach, and we launched a truck some height into the, I have no idea. It could have been 2, 3, 4 feet. But we came down. We didn't end up breaking like the back axle. We had in 4-wheel drive, and the front, we were able to carry it out. We drove for another few more minutes, and that was it. And the tornado let up and went the other direction. And we got out. We were just shook. And after that, actually, so that was my second year storm chasing. And at that point, I believed I was going to do it forever. And I quit storm chasing. That was halfway through the season that year. And the season's not long, but I quit storm chasing for that year. I was like, I'm not going to lose my life over this. Up until that point, we hadn't had a close call. And once that happened, I was like, this is, I like to live life on the edge, but I'm not going to lose my life over it.
It gets real sometimes and kind of gets in your face. And I think a lot of young men develop a sense of invincibility.
100%. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you come up against it. And it's like, oh, wait, I'm not like, this is real. This could have killed me right then. And what would my life be worth if that was the case? Before we deployed, I had all my Marines write their own obituaries so that they could think about what they were leaving behind, and if this next thing was the end of their life, then what would it mean? What would their life have been if it were shrunk to a paragraph in a newspaper? And I think that it's important for a lot of people to do that periodically. Like if something ended it right now, what is the sum total of your life condensed to a paragraph? And if that's not what you want it to be, what are you doing to change that? Mm. And for you, you were accomplishing incredible things. What I think a lot of people don't understand about what you do is there's a really important scientific element to that. And you were telling me that the guy that Twister was actually based on, he's saved countless lives by increasing the amount of time that people have for warning. That's amazing. Like that's something that storm chasers did, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So his name was Tim Samaras. He was the Wayne Gretzky, the godfather of storm chasing. And he passed away a number of years ago, but he still is the best today.
Yeah.
Nobody will ever replace that. And so what he did, to give context with Twister, is like, if you watch the movie Twister, they have Dorothy in there that has little nodes that go up, and it's measuring, wind pressure, precipitation, wind speed, all these different things, trying to understand the nature of this beast. And he was doing that at that time. And so it was largely based off of a true story with his work. And so it was very admirable, the work that he did. I can't say I'm doing that kind of work. There's not a whole lot of science left to be done. I relate a lot to bull riding. Is that you have a pretty good idea what's going to happen, but you never know all the variables.
Right.
And that's very much with storm chasing. And so Tim did figure out the majority of the mix, and there is a few, not I wouldn't call them teams like university colleges out there trying to find out like that 0.001% more that they can. But that's not our initiative. When we are out there, we're giving warnings to the public. We're letting them know, because when you're looking at the forecast for weather, it's telling you whether it's raining or snowing. And for us, when those high winds are coming in, if there's going to be circulation up in the atmosphere, but we can tell you real time, is it touching the ground?
Yeah.
Because they don't know that for sure. And so we can tell you if it's touching the ground, how big it is, where we expect it to go given its nature. And so we're reporting that back to the government agencies, whether it's Canada or the States. And so...
so do you have a direct line to NOAA?
One of the guys I work with does.
Okay.
I can't say that I do. I do. We have what's called the Spotter Network. And so so I'll talk with local NOAA agencies, pardon me. Like in my head, I see NOAA as this monster which covers the whole state.
Sure.
But we will talk to local NOAA agencies. So I do have contacts when I'm in certain areas. I wouldn't say it takes necessarily a certain level to get there, but it's who kind of thing. But nonetheless, it's always whatever we see, it's going to 911. It's going to NOAA.
Yeah.
Essentially anybody and everybody who will listen to us, we're getting the information out, and that's our part in that regard.
That's incredibly valuable. Incredibly valuable. I know a lot of people ask how you get into something like this, and I know it's a bit of a worn out question for you, but people want to know, like, what got you into trying to chase down tornadoes?
Yeah, James, it's just failed out of high school, ran out of options, and it was I was bouncing around in life. I had a university degree in finance. I thought I was going to be a stockbroker, and all that taught me is that that's not what I wanted to do. And came out, I was working the rigs, and I was what I did know is I loved the outdoors.
Yeah.
And I love adventures, and any adventure I could get my hands on. And so I was working in the mining industry, oil and gas, and traveling around the world in my time off, doing adventures, doing photography, videography. And I wasn't quite sure what was going to lead me. And then one day having a conversation much like this, a guy I didn't know was like, you should come chase a tornado with us. And I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? And
sounds like an adventure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You ever see actually the movie with Jim Carrey called Yes Man?
Yeah.
That movie changed my life.
Okay.
Up until that movie, that movie came out when I was just finishing university, and I was feeling miserable. And I was like, growing up, I love the outdoors. Every night we're out, like in Canada, we're out stealing snow from the rink to go snowboarding. We're building jumps, our BMXs and our dirt bikes. Every night I was outside until dark, and that changed once I got older. I thought I wanted a big house and a fancy car, and I got the wrong goals in mind for me. And and then Yes Man came up, and I realized I've been saying no to so many things. And so I started doing that and saying yes to any opportunity that came up. And this tornado conversation came up. I was like, yeah, sure, we'll give it a shot. And I had no idea what to expect. I've seen the movie Twister, but I had no idea that people did it in real life. And so spring rolls around. I go out and see, it was 11 years ago. I go out and see my first tornado. Well, hold on. We go out for a week. And it's 8 days. Out of the first 7 days, we're all blue skies. And storm chasing is largely that. Like, we can forecast as well as we want, but it's like, I don't know, it's a lot like baking. And it takes ingredients. And anyways, 7 days goes by. We see nothing. I'm like, storm chasing sucks. I am not coming back. And it was the last day. On this trip, I was driving. I got put into the driver's seat, and we were coming through this big hail course. So this blizzard of hail. It's like golf ball size hail. We come out on the other side, and as the hail starts to clear, we see this mile-wide tornado. We call it a wedge tornado because it looks like a big wedge coming into the ground. And it looks like a big drill bit drilling into the ground. And I couldn't comprehend it. I still struggle to this day. It feels like you're seeing something from out of this world.
Yeah.
Like, it was a feeling of like, if you ever scared that growing up there was something in the closet or there's a boogeyman under the bed, it was like looking under the bed and finding out that the boogeyman is real. But you're an adult and you're like, how? It was just hot. And even to this day, we encounter some big ones, and I'm like, I can never take it all in.
Yeah.
And I do my best. I do my best, like, really, because I know I've made those mistakes in the past where I get distracted. I'm like, no, like, like fully embrace this moment. If it's 30 seconds or if it's a half an hour, like I want to feel and be a completely part of it. And it's always tough. Anyways, so I see this tornado, and it's drilling into the ground. It kind of feels like an earthquake. It's rumbling the ground a bit. It sounds like a jet engine, like an airplane. Like you got that roar, that you can hear the winds. And if it wasn't already terrifying enough, it comes across this grove of trees I'll never forget. And it was just these massive, full-grown trees, I don't know, 40, 50 feet tall. And like toothpicks, they just start going up, just flying off the ground. And it was at that point, there's so many factors that draw me to it. It's so absolutely, it is destructive, but it's so powerful and beautiful and mystic, and you just feel so small beside it. It's like standing beside a mountain, and then the mountain started to get up and start walking, kind of thing. And after that, that training went on for about, the training went on for a really long time. The training went on for 4 hours. It still to this day, it's the longest storm chase I've ever had. Most tornadoes last for, I don't know, 5 minutes, like a half an hour. And, but after that, we go out for steak dinner. It's a tradition with storm chasing. You catch a tornado and, you go out for a steak dinner, and I'll sit in that steak dinner, we're bullshitting. And I just, for the first time in my life, and I'm, 26 years old at this point, and for the first time in my life, I was like, this is where I was meant to be. And like, like there's something in me that's like, this is my purpose. And it was a week later, I called home and I quit my job, and I was like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to chase this dream until I go broke and see what happens next. I was in my 20s, I was single, I was able to do that kind of thing. And so, that's where it all began. Long story short.
I mean, that's amazing. And everyone should be so lucky as to find an experience that gives them that feeling, like that clarity in that moment, that like, oh, this is it. Like, this is the thing for me. And I think a lot of people experience it on a smaller scale with like food, or they'll find it in a relationship, and like they'll just feel that love and passion. Absolutely. That just washes over them. They're like, this is the person for me. But to find a purpose and then to find a way to turn that purpose into a profession is so rare. And, obviously you're still very passionate about it today. I've got so many questions. What are some of the conditions that you look for that tells you not only do we have the conditions that we need to create a tornado, but I also think I know like where I need to be in Kansas or Oklahoma or wherever you're at?
Yeah. So 11 years ago, when I first started storm chasing, it was a lot of doing our own forecasting. And, NOAA has their great storm forecasting as well. But at that point, we there was a few times where we would nail the mark and NOAA might not. Yep. And that's not always the case, but it was once in a while. But now, fast forward 11 years, the technology with radars and forecasting have come so far. It really makes our our own personal forecasting not needed. Okay, like I can look at NOAA's 2-week forecast, and 98% of the time they're going to nail it. And so
what are the conditions that you need to create a tornado? It's a hot and a cold front coming together.
Yeah, absolutely. So what you need is you need a very warm day, essentially. Now, a typical tornado. We have other tornadoes called cold core funnels. Like sometimes up in Canada, we'll get a tornado right before snow falls. Okay. And there's no heat around. And those some different mixes, or you can get a fire-nado where the fire creates its own weather environment for that moment. Yep. But in Tornado Alley, a typical tornado, what you're looking for is throughout the day, we have daytime heating. So that heating comes down, heats up the ground, and that starts to create airlift. And so that airlift is going up. And what you need is wind shear at different levels. And so, at 5,000 feet, the wind's going a certain direction. And then at 7,500 feet, the wind's going a slightly different direction. And so as that air is lifting off the ground, the wind shear is hitting it and starting to spin it like a top. Okay. And that starts to create that twist. And as long as that air can rise fast enough and be strong enough, because sometimes it starts to rise and doesn't make it. But as long as it's going up fast enough and strong enough, it's going to keep going up into the atmosphere. And, for yourself, for anybody who might be listening to this, when you're looking out and sometimes you might look at a set of white clouds that kind of looks like a tower. And that's what we say, it's a tower going up. And it doesn't look like a regular, pile of mashed potatoes. It looks like something's going vertical into the atmosphere. That's what's happening, is there's circulating air pushing up into the atmosphere. And if you can make it past the 30 to 40,000 mark, that's what we're looking for. And then once it starts to have that kind of pressure in the environment, it's going to keep on spinning. And as long as we still have hot air coming from the ground, and we still have that wind shear that's happening. And then as the day goes on, we have the jet stream that starts to cut into the mix, and it starts to feed into that. And so as long as all those factors there are at play and everything is clean, and where maybe it cleans, like we don't have smoke from fires, because smoke can diminish all of that. And as long as there's not other storms nearby, because you need clean airflow.
Okay.
Air is fuel for these storms, and as long as it has like a clean intake, then these storms can build. That's the condensed version of what we're looking for in these storms.
Gotcha. I've heard things about like the sky turning green. Is that real?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you see these storms, you're going to see blacks, you're going to see blues, you're going to see greens. And so typically some of the coloring you're going to see inside of storms is, the first thing you're going to see is blues. And so that is the sunlight bouncing off of the rain, and the refracting light, makes those blues. And then you might start seeing some whites. That's usually what comes next, and that's the hail starting to come out. And so once you start to see that white coming out, that's typically hail. And if we see white, you can estimate that's going to be between, pea-sized hail to like golf ball-sized hail.
Yep.
And then once that storm starts to darken up and then eventually go green, that just means the hail's getting bigger and bigger. If you see some deep greens inside a storm, there's a good chance that's baseball-sized hail, like baseball-sized ice chunks, because it's the sunlight refracting off of those ice chunks that's creating that green color. But that said, if you go and Google what I'm telling you right now, there's lots of arguments for that, because the reason is the sun's not always at the same spot.
Right.
Sometimes if it's 3 p.m., well, it's coming from directly above, essentially. And, if it's 6 p.m., well, now or 6 or 7 p.m., we got a setting sun. But
I was wondering if there's a specific time of day that tornadoes are most likely.
In years past, I would have told, we always had the idea that for us, work started around like 12 p.m., noon kind of thing. And the heating will happen between noon to about 3 o'clock. And we should be expecting the storms should pop 2 to 3. We should be seeing a tornado between 3 to 5 o'clock.
Okay.
And that was the going rate up until about 2 years ago. And now we're seeing, this year I chased a tornado at 10 a.m. one day. And I've also had many tornadoes happening after midnight. And now morning tornadoes are quite rare. Tornadoes throughout the night, especially if you're in the southern states, if we're talking like Alabama or Mississippi, Arkansas, that does happen, but still quite odd.
Yeah.
But a typical tornado in Tornado Alley, if we're talking about that, is that late afternoon, because it takes that daytime heating to build up the energy for that tornado.
Is the videography and photography aspect of this a really important thing to you?
Yeah, if you don't know yet, I love storms. Yeah. And when we talk storm chasing, a lot of times the first thing we go to is tornadoes, and understandably, but to tell you the truth, tornadoes aren't my favorite part of storm chasing.
Okay. Tell me more.
When we get to see these storms, I don't have my phone on me. When we get to see these storms, and for anybody listening, if you just go and Google storm chasing, or if you want to go and have a look at the work we do, my name is Ricky Forbes. My phone is here. I'll show you after I explain it. Okay. Is that these storms, sometimes they'll have the fronts of the storms like the shelf clouds, or sometimes they turn into what we call motherships. And so they really look like an alien spaceship. Yeah. And, I've seen these things that look like alien spaceships that can be covering a town of 1,000 people, 2,000 people. So, we're talking like maybe an eighth of a mile, maybe half a mile wide. And they have all these different striations and different coloring happening up there.
Is that lenticularis?
No, lenticularis. I might have this a bit wrong, but the lenticular usually happens like on top of the storm clouds.
Okay.
It's kind of like bending light. Like, let me show you a photo, and if you can explain it better, you do that. When we get to see things like that right there.
Wow.
And
that looks like an atomic explosion without the funnel going to the ground.
Exactly. And
the top of the mushroom cloud.
100%. Yeah. So, if you're listening, if you Google like motherships with storm chasing, that's typically what will come up. Or like this thing here, this was slowly rotating while it was like dropping from the cloud. And there's nothing dangerous about this. Well, it can look dangerous, but what happens is the storm's starting to spin out.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have enough energy left for a tornado to happen. And so you just get to see some of the coolest things here, like this one here. This is half of it, but like that's in the middle. That is a grain elevator, so a 2-story tall building, and this is covering a town of about 1,500 people, and it's slowly rotating over top of them. And that's what I really love about storm chasing. Like these moments, when you get to see these kind of moments,
and that does look very alien. Like that looks like the Independence Day, like
100%.
The sort of cloud formations that they CGI'd in with that for the alien invasion in Independence Day. It looks like that in real life. So I have to imagine that when you're in that town, you've got to be looking up, just like praying to whoever you pray to that it doesn't develop more.
For sure. You know, when people see this, because most people don't know this information, they see this and they think the world's coming to an end. Like that, it looks like a massive tornado is about to drop to the ground. It looks like a big vacuum is about to drop to the ground and suck it up. And so we do our best to get the word out. But sometimes, like that moment I just showed you there, that was a 5-minute moment. And so we don't have time to warn people for that. Like it was moving about 60 miles an hour. And so we were doing everything we could to keep in front of it, because the truth is, when it comes down to it, the way we make an income is photo and video. If we get behind it, it doesn't look like that. We have to stay in front. And so we don't have time to stop and like tell the gas station, like, listen, tell the locals, like, this is what's happening kind of thing. And so for those people, that can be very terrifying.
Yeah. I can't imagine. You know, I live up in the mountains, right at the base of some mountains, and then 40 miles away is the deepest canyon on the continent. And everybody always said we can't have tornadoes here because tornadoes can't work with steep terrain. Last year we had one right on top of one of our small towns, and the damage that occurred was mostly from the hail, but they had hail that, you know, was about just a little bit smaller than baseball sized, and it didn't last for a tremendous amount of time, but every west facing window in this town of, you know, 1,000 people went out. All the siding on that side of the town went out, and when we saw pictures of it, it looked like a funnel cloud. And, you know, they came back and said that it was an F3 tornado in the mountains of Northeast Oregon.
Wow.
And I started looking into the history of tornadoes in Oregon, and I'm going to get these numbers wrong, but say there's been 20 in the last 100 years, 10 of those have been in the last 10 years.
Interesting.
Something like that, you know. So it's definitely something that's starting to occur more in that region of lately, and I find that very interesting. And I'm sure that this happens in the Midwest. One of the coolest things about what was largely a tragedy for the town, the next day, like the whole population of the county was there, and, you know, they're doing everything that they can to fix stuff. And the state of Oregon made sure that they could get windows there a little bit quicker, because windows were back ordered like 6 months at the time, and you know, trying to make sure that everybody was good to go going into winter. And people have been working extremely hard fixing roofs all summer long. So whenever there is a tragedy like that, you also get to see the best of people later on, and I think that's great. We got to see that today. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we're here at a decked ambassador summit in Stanley, Idaho. So many cool, interesting people. You and I have talked about this over and over again. Like, the people that are here as ambassadors for this company are just like, they're all at the top of their game at whatever they do, and they've lived such interesting lives as you have. And, you know, we went out and did a whitewater trip on the South Fork of the Payette, beautiful section of the river, great whitewater. We had great guides. When we were on our way back from that, unfortunately, there was an accident on the highway where a gentleman died and his wife was hurt really badly. But everybody from this crew found a task to do. Like we had people running traffic, we had people rendering first aid, we had people holding up a tarp so that this woman would be in the shade. And I think that was a great example of something that was an absolute tragedy. I mean, her husband was lying dead on the side of the road. This vehicle was burning, almost starting a forest fire, like listening to the propane and everything else blowing up. It was a really intense day, but we also got to see lots of people, strangers that were parked on the side of the road. Like everybody got involved and helped at whatever they could. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. It's a tough thing. It's seeing that come out of those hardships, but the way that brings people together, and all of a sudden, any preconceived notions, any bitterness, it's all washed away.
Yep.
And for that moment, like you're carrying humans doing the right thing, and there's many times a year, you'll never see it in our work, as I have no interest whatsoever in documenting the harsh side of storm chasing, but the truth is, about 50% of the time, tornadoes hit populated areas, and
really,
and we do search and rescue, we do first aid, and you see that in those communities, and I don't know, it's tough. It's just
it's got to break your heart.
It really does. As I start talking about ice skips, my mind starts getting flooded with images, and it is great how the communities come together. It's really tough to handle. Families get torn apart. It's just, shoot, man, I can't go into a whole lot of detail. It's super tough stuff to see people's lives torn apart like that, and to lose loved ones. And the best you can do is just to be there and help them for that point.
I'm sure you've seen some acts of just absolute heroism throughout this too. Do any of those come to mind?
Like hundreds. I would hate to leave anybody out of the mix, but one that pops in my mind right away is there was this tornado that tore through this town of Pilgrim, Nebraska. It was in 2014, and we were there on the outside, but it nearly completely leveled the whole town. I think it was a town about 2,000-3,000 people, a smaller town, but very scary tornado. It was an EF4 tornado. Tornadoes on a scale of 0 to 5. And so EF4, that's a big, scary tornado. And there's a story from this bank there that it was rush hour for the bank. They had lots of customers in there, and they have lots of staff. And this bank manager, I think, I would say he's like in his early 70s. Awesome guy, super nice guy, down to earth. And I got to meet him afterwards. And I spoke with him and his staff, and essentially the story that came out is that they saw this tornado coming in, and the tornado sirens just went off a bit too late. And sometimes that happens. And the tornado sirens went off a bit too late, and so they start going through the procedure. Tornado, they have their procedures, and so they start putting everybody into the safe. But as they're putting him into the safe, the bank manager, this gentleman, he all of a sudden realized that the bank door could only be locked from the outside, and this was a miss in the training. And as he was like loading everybody in, and he realized this, he left himself out on the outside, and he locked the door, put everybody in like the safe spot for the bank, and he went and found an air vent, a larger air vent he was able to get his body into, and he said about half his body was out. And the tornado came right over top, leveled the bank, actually ended up taking the safe and rolled the safe a few times, but everybody was fine inside.
My God.
And he just remembers like hanging, like he somehow found some handholds inside this vent. And it felt like, he said his legs were up. It felt like a vacuum was trying to suck him out. And of course, like the roar of this tornado, but he got everybody to safety, and he made that split second decision that, and he didn't know if he was going to find that air vent. Like
right.
Everybody else came first,
Yep.
and he was sorted out after, and he had less than seconds to find that. And just that's badass.
In in the early 1900s, a lot of this area that we're in burned to the ground.
Okay.
And there were so many fires in western Montana, northern Idaho, and eastern Oregon that people thought it was the apocalypse.
Yeah.
What came of that was the foundation of the United States Forest Service. But in Wallace, Idaho, there was a guy named Ed Pulaski, and he was leading a team of guys that were just whatever workers he could find to go fight fire. So imagine people with mining equipment, nothing that was fire retardant, guys who were not firefighters going out to try to fight these fires and save these towns. They had a fire burning over the top of them. He knew about a mine, and he took all these guys and put them inside this mine, and a couple of them wanted to leave, like they didn't want to get stuck in there as this fire's ripping over the top of them. And Ed stood at the mouth of the mine and drew his pistol on these guys to keep them in there. He had terrible burns on his body, but he was able to save these men. The most popular firefighting tool out there to this day is called the Pulaski. It's an axe on one end and a hoe on the other.
Okay.
But that's that same exact mentality that gentleman had at the bank. Like, I'm going to risk everything for myself in order to save these people. And you've just got to love that there are people like that out there. That there used to be, that there still are.
100%. That character, that strength, that everybody comes first. Like, that's the kind of guy that opens the door for others. And really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. I bet you've seen some cool lightning.
Yeah, absolutely. Many stories from over the years, some recent ones. This past year, I got to see my first case of upwards lightning.
Mm-hmm.
We came by, so around 20% of lightning actually starts to the ground and goes up into the atmosphere. And so that's pretty wild. We were by this wind farm, and lightning was coming off of the turbines and going up into the sky. All sorts of lightning. We've had lightning, hit right beside us. I've never been hit by lightning before. I've never actually been asked that question, so I don't have an answer ready for you. But
no, that's all right.
Yeah.
I think lightning is another example of nature that can humble you very quickly.
For sure.
Especially if lightning hits close to you. There's no one that takes that with stoicism. Like, that's a reaction. You get down to the core of who you are if lightning hits next to you.
Oh yeah, that scares you to being a child again. Yeah, when that lightning hits and that thunder comes right after, it just shakes you.
Yeah. Lacey was telling a story about a guy that fell off of a tarpon boat and got dragged down by a bull shark. Another bull shark showed up, immediately bit a huge chunk out of this guy, and the guide went to visit him in the hospital, and he's like, shoot, man, I've had lots worse stuff happen to me. I've been struck by lightning 3 times.
No, 3 times?
And it's like, you might, if you're that kind of person that bad luck happens to you, you might just like walk around with business cards and be like, just so you know, like, this is the kind of human that I am.
Yeah. You should take life insurance out on me. Yeah. 3 times?
Yeah. So crazy stuff.
But talk about perspective, right? You're like, oh, it can't get any worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty wild. Let's say somebody's listening to this and they feel like they have that connection with the concept. Like, man, I want to do that. Obviously, this is a dangerous thing to get into. How does one enter into the world of storm chasing and do so from an educated and safe standpoint so that they can actually grow into it and not become part of the problem, but can participate in what this is?
Yeah, that's a great question. I meet a lot of people who are interested in into storm chasing, and technology has come so far. When I first started storm chasing, we had the specialized computer and we had the subscription to the satellite radar. We were paying like $3,000 US a month. Now you can get that exact same information for $10 a year as an app on your phone. And this app tells you about hail and lightning and tells you where the tornado is, where the tornado is going. But that accessibility, while it's super awesome, and on one side it's keeping people safe. On the other hand, if you want to be a storm chaser, that can get you into a lot of trouble quickly. because there's so many factors that can go wrong. One, those radars can lag. They can be off a little bit. There's a lot of experience and intuition that really comes with storm chasing once you get into the heat of the moment. So if you are listening and you're interested in getting into storm chasing 100%, I recommend it. I think it's the coolest thing ever. You'll never, the things you get to see, it'll blow your mind.
Yeah.
Even to this day, 11 years later, every day is amazing, and I can tell you 20 times this year I saw things, and I had to put my camera down, and I was like, this is just, I can't believe this is real life.
Yeah.
And but anyways, if you want to get into storm chasing, is to team up with others, and ideally team up with those who've been doing it for a while and haven't screwed up too bad. Because we are seeing, it's great to see new storm chasers out there, but they're getting into trouble quickly because, for example, there's a storm chasers who like to get really close to tornadoes. And while I told you a story about me getting caught in a tornado, that's not our goal. We're usually staying about a half a mile away. There's storm chasers who drive tanks, and they drive right into the middle of a tornado.
Yeah.
And there's others trying to follow those footsteps, and that's
which is great until you get hit by a combine.
Yeah, or that tornado sucks you up, and you're not driving that $1 million tank,
right?
And so. Circling back, if you want to get into it, I would, the way I learned was just YouTube and Googling, and then experience and teaming up with other experienced storm chasers. What's really cool with storm chasing, like many industries, is they're friendly, and if you reach out to them and you start chatting them up, and I would say, I would still say the two best ways are Instagram or Twitter. I would say probably Twitter for reaching out to storm chasers and just starting a conversation with them. Lots of storm chasers often have a seat or two open in their vehicle, and just saying, hey, listen, I'll come and split gas and split hotel costs, and there's a really good chance that they'll let you come out.
So that's the rookie position, is just helping with expenses and being willing to help with whatever.
Yeah. Essentially, you're becoming the water boy, and that's how I got into it. That's why I started as a driver, and I was just filling a role that they needed, and most storm chasers need that, because storm chasing does take a team, because you're reading road maps, you're reading weather, you're watching the road, and there's so many different things you need to have your focus on that you need a team to do that. So if you're interested in doing it, is teaming up with others until you get your legs underneath you, and it's not difficult at all. You just start reaching out to people, and I know many storm chasers that would welcome a fresh storm chaser coming out.
Cool. That's awesome, man. What advice would you give to your younger self that was watching that first mile wide wedge come out of the sky and drill down into the earth?
So my first thought is do it sooner, but it's still something I still struggle with today, and it comes back to about chasing your passions, and if you're excited to get out of the bed in the morning, you're on the right path.
Yeah.
And I was 26 at the time, and man, I just wish I would have done that when I was 19 years old.
Right.
And because I got, for myself, I got lost in this, this idea that I wanted this fancy car and this big house, and I was working, worked many years away, and did it. It was not that it necessarily was all for nothing. I say to my kids and anybody I meet, I know it's not always easy. And even, I've been doing it for 11 years. This year was barely a break-even year for us, because people see it from the outside and they're like, oh, everything must be amazing. Well, no, it's I'm working my balls off. Sorry, Grandma. But I'm working. Some years are really great. Some years aren't. But shit, when you come down to it, I know this sounds a bit preachy, but you got one life. I got, for me, I'm 37. I got 50 years left-ish, I hope. I want to live it to the fullest, because what's the point otherwise?
Yeah.
And I just wish I would have tried it sooner. Because you grow up here in this fun life. Love what you do and never work a day in your life.
Right.
And up until I started storm chasing, don't get me wrong. I enjoyed my jobs, and if my past employers are listening, no, I'm kidding. But I wasn't excited to get out of bed in the morning.
Right.
And I couldn't help but think that love what you do and never work in your life was just a bunch of BS. And I'm so glad I kept seeking until I did find that. And I don't know, it's just and I hope for anybody listening, and and for my younger self, is just that if something does light your fire, try it out. You never quite know where it's going to take you. And it's a conversation. I don't know if we were having this earlier, but I was having somebody else here today, and I find a lot of people very similar around this group here today. Is that you just got to keep pulling at strings, and you never quite know where one opportunity might lead to. If you might start doing something and maybe it's costing you money, or you're doing it for free, but you never quite know who you're going to meet or what that might lead to. And that's really what storm chasing has taught me, is that, we get I find like in the North American culture, get addicted to being like, okay, this is step 1 in my life. This is step 2, this is step 3. And now I know the rest of my life. If you're willing to take a risk and maybe not know fully what step 2 might be, it can be a lot of fun. And there's a chance it might work out.
Yeah, if you just don't quit, then it just might work.
100%.
And that's it. Like if you quit, it definitely won't.
Yeah.
And it's really as simple as that. And I'm not saying that there's a lot of people out there that need to quit what they're doing. So I'm not saying that you need to stick with what you're doing forever. But if it is truly that thing that you're passionate about, that gets you excited about getting out of bed in the morning, then you need to stick with that thing. And it's really important. And also starting early. If you're not embarrassed by your first effort at something, you started too late. Mm-hmm. Like, just get after it. And no matter what, a year from now, if you work at anything, I don't care what it is, if you work at anything for a year, you're going to be able to look back and be like, man, I was really, really terrible a year ago. I'm still terrible now, but I'm so much less so. And I think that perspective only comes after you've stuck with something for long enough to give yourself that perspective.
For sure. And there's this idea, like, there's this quote, hard work always beats talent. And don't get me wrong, like a person wants to be talented, but like there's some days I just struggle. And but I keep that in my head. It's like, well, if I'm willing to put in the sweat, this will pull through. And I do pride myself on, like, if anything, I can be the hardest worker in the room.
Yeah.
And something else I often hear from people, like, if you're listening to this conversation, you might have an idea in your head that you want to do. Is I get the objection of like, well, somebody's already doing that, or somebody's already succeeding at that. There's always room for more. And whoever that person is you're thinking about who is succeeding right now, they thought that too before they got started.
That is so true. That is so true. And it's not a valid reason to not try at something. This podcast was very much that way. I'd enjoyed podcasts for a while. I'd enjoyed being a guest on podcasts, but I thought, man, the people that are good at this have been doing this for years now. I'm too late. And I thought that for years. For years, I thought I'm too late. And then I got to the point where it's like, well, I'm just going to try it. And I had good friends who were successful podcasters that said, don't do it. Like, just go on other people's shows. That'll do just as much for you. And they couldn't have been more wrong. And I'm so glad that I did start. I also so wish I would have started earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm happy with it, because how else would I have ever got to have a conversation like this?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so important. And 4 years ago, anybody in the podcast world would have told you it was too late.
Yeah.
But look where you are now.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I just think there's always room for more, no matter the industry.
Yeah. I agree. And and hard work is something that anyone can apply. Like, that is such a critical skill. It's a critical talent, really. I do think that the ability to work hard is a talent, but it's something that I do believe anybody can do. And if you find that you are unable to work hard, it's probably because you can't fuel what you're doing with passion in the same way that, as we're talking about these tornadoes, they need clean air to be able to generate power. The clean air is the passion in this metaphor, right? If you've got that passion, then you can generate tremendous power from it if you just do the work.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if it's not quite there, then it might be something to question.
Yeah.
Maybe this isn't quite the right path, because I truly do believe for any human, like once you find that passion, like there's days that we'll go from like 5 a.m. till, way past midnight. And then we'll have to do the same day the next day. Like we're sleeping on a few hours a night for like days and days and days on end, but it never feels like work. And I'm not lying to you. Like it doesn't feel like work. And I love it. And I really do think like once you do find your passion, it will light that kind of fire for you.
Where can people see all of this? Like everything that you're doing, where can they actually see this? Because this is visually stunning stuff. I mean,
you talking about like my hair, or what are we talking about here?
Yeah. No, the photography and the videos and stuff like that, that's a way that anybody can support you, is just by following along, and they can be wildly entertained and amazed by these images.
Yeah, if you head to tornadowatch.com, that has all my links on there, or if you just search for Ricky Forbes on any platform, Ricky Forbes. If you do check out my any of my content, please do drop a comment. I find that to be the most support. Like when I get to interact with people and hear their comments, I'll definitely answer back. That's fun.
And that's free for people to do. Like it takes such a minimal effort for someone to support you. And that support might be the thing that makes it so that you can get there to tell a family that, hey, there's a tornado coming towards your house right now.
Absolutely.
And it really does come down to stuff like that. So I would highly encourage people to follow along in this, because it's mind blowing. And it's more impressive than what you've seen on television or on the news or in movies. It's so much bigger and more real, the way you're capturing this stuff. I think you've done a tremendous job.
Oh, it means a lot, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And safe travels after the event.
Yeah, thank you. Likewise.
Appreciate you. Thank you all very much for listening. I'm going to keep bringing you these stories from normal people just like you who have done extraordinary things. Everyone is an expert at something, and they have interesting perspectives on life and work and the environment and all of the things that we care about. I'm going to keep bringing that to you. And I want to thank you so much for making this show possible. I also want to thank Emily Bratcher for producing this show. She does a great job editing. Really appreciate her. I want to thank John Chatelain. He did the art for the Six Ranch podcast. And Celia, soon to be Harlander, she digitized that so that we can get it out there on the internet for you. Also want to thank Justin Hay for writing this original music and the beautiful whistling that you're listening to right now. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. Please keep listening to the show. Write me a review if you feel like it, and just keep doing your thing, and we'll all learn from this together. It's been fun, and we're just getting started.